Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on this Friday, July 3rd, day before 4th of July. And I've got my friend Larry Brown with us today in the studio, social distancing. This is the first time that I've seen Larry in person since...
Live.
Yeah, what is it, February?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But we're across the way from each other here. But tomorrow's 4th of July, and we always like to have Larry on with all the national holidays to either share a story or a song.
4th of July Eve.
4th of July Eve,
yes,
right.
yes.
So what do you have for us on 4th of July
Well, I'm going to
Eve?
reminisce a bit and maybe do some commentary on the 4th of July.
Okay, so here is Larry Brown to reminisce and comment on the 4th of July.
Well, we know that the 4th of July is around the corner when we start seeing the fireworks sales and the tents and canopies that show up along the roadside and other businesses that have fireworks for sale. And so we're anticipating now that celebration. Well, I was remembering when I was a child my fascination with fireworks. Now, particularly when I was a small child, our family would gather out in the yard, 4th of July evening, probably we had a picnic, and then we would shoot off our fireworks. And for us kids, we'd saved our money, of course, to buy those special things. And the fountains and the snakes, those curled ashes that would come up, and the Roman candles and the spinners, and it was a wonderful time. Of course, there were a few incidents. I remember once there was the sparkler incident where my sister ran into my back with a sparkler, and there was the fireworks that I'd saved up money to buy that was the buzzing bees. And as I lit it, it tipped over, and I remember running for the safety of family with the buzzing bees, of little sparkly things all over the place. And of course, there was the community event where that town would gather at the lakeside in the evening. People would bring lawn chairs and blankets, and the city would put on their fireworks display. Those were all wonderful times. But as I got to be older adolescence, it was the firecrackers that captured me, to have them explode. And if I could get away with it, I would even be setting off those firecrackers before the 4th of July. And of course, since they were costly, I didn't want to do more than one at a time. But you know how exciting it was to have a whole bunch of them just go, popping like that. And of course, as I got to be an older adolescent, like my peers, we were interested in more explosive devices like cherry bombs and M80s. Now, in Nebraska, where I grew up, there was a certain limit on firepower, but we could sneak across just 7 miles to the Kansas border, and there at the state line store or a little further south, we could, go to the back room and ask the right person for those special explosives. But of course, with exploding fireworks and firecrackers came the obligatory parental discussion of the relationship between fireworks and the 4th of July. Reminding us that, of course, for centuries, people have celebrated victories in war and battle by exploding things, shooting guns and cannons and rockets. And for me, there seemed kind of a paradox of using the weapons of war to celebrate the end of war, but that was tradition. And, of course, I was told, as we mostly were in history, that it was John Adams who suggested that we ought to be celebrating the signing of the Declaration of Independence, as he said, with a number of ways, including guns and cannons and bonfires and bells ringing. Although I think historically it was not until the first anniversary of the Declaration of Independence that fireworks were actually used as public display. Well, it was a few decades ago. I was at a preschool where a little girl was hiding under the table because of the sound of fireworks, and I was told that she was a recent adoptee from Vietnam. And for her, the sound of firecrackers was the sound of warfare, and so she was hiding in terror. Well, through the years, I've known other refugees from places of war, not only Southeast Asia, but the Middle East and Central America. And for them, the sounds of the 4th of July are not necessarily celebration, but be reminders of actual warfare, of gunships, of bombs and bombers, and today of drones. So I began to think, what might be the most appropriate sounds of the 4th of July? Sounds that would indeed celebrate independence and freedom and democracy? What would those sounds be? Knowing, of course, that military explosive devices have historically been the way to celebrate it, might there be another sound? And I thought, perhaps, maybe it's the sound of the voices of people who are marching and asking for peace and justice, those who are calling for equal recognition between minority and majority. Maybe it's the sound of those singing and speaking and praying, asking for calm and consideration and creative solutions to crisis. Maybe the sounds of the 4th of July that would celebrate freedom and independence and democracy might be the sounds of folks who are generally wanting a complete freedom and democracy experience. Oh, perhaps. Maybe the sound of the 4th of July might be for us to pause and listen to nature in its harmony. Or perhaps, maybe the most appropriate sound of the 4th of July is a reverent pause in silence. Well, I ask it on this 4th of July, we not only hear, but make those sounds that are most appropriate for us to celebrate freedom and peace and democracy and justice for all.
That's very nice, Larry. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, for reminiscing and giving us food for thought on the 4th of July. What will you be doing on the 4th of July?
Well, I think probably, and this goes back to family tradition, you have to have a picnic.
Right.
That's 4th of July tradition.
You know what I remember when I was younger, of course, getting the fireworks, and always on 4th of July morning, my father and I would go to the little fireworks stand about 7 or 8 miles from our house on the highway. And my dad used to smoke those Lord Abbott cigars. Oh. And we'd get one of his empty cigar boxes, and I'd take the firecrackers apart, put them in there, and then once in a while we get to buy some cherry bombs, and we'd put those cherry bombs underneath a tin can and shoot up. Dangerous as can be, but we did that as a kid, and I remember that. Maybe
in our maturity we understand what the 4th of July really is to be.
Exactly. How did they get in touch with you, Larry?
Well, brownstory@hotmail.com.
Thank you. Happy 4th of July to you.
And to you.
pepperpmissouri.edu. Bye-bye.